led off from the main fleet, descending into the wreckage. Each one carried Earth Fleet retrieval units, AI-assisted operatives fused with old human instincts and neuromachine reflexes. Not talkers, not negotiators, hunters. Inside Bunker 9, the ground shook violently. Dust fell from the ceiling. The guards screamed at each other, trying to re-establish uplinks. Their comms hissed static. 10th outer blast doors turned red. Freya clutched the bench, breathing fast. An officer shouted, "Reinforce that door." Too late. With a thunderclap, the steel exploded inward and 3 figures stepped through. Tall, silent, armored head to toe in obsidian alloy. They didn't ask who was who. They scanned DNA from across the room, cross-referenced it in seconds. Then one of them knelt before Freya. Freya Callis, the voice said through modulated filters. Blood of Commander Tyrell Callis, Earthfleet conferred. She stared, eyes wide. "Your grandfather died sending your message." She couldn't speak. "We're here to finish it." Within minutes, all 17 prisoners were secured. And within 10, every Imperial officer on Thera's Prime had been executed. Not with cruelty, with precision, with memory. Earthfleet didn't take prisoners. Not anymore. From orbit, Admiral Heron watched the last off bunkers crumble as Leviathan withdrew its cannon and powered down. He should have felt triumph, but all he felt was hunger. Not his own. The ships, Leviathan wanted more. It had been built to end wars before they began. A last assert, a warning written in gravity and death. And now it was awake, surrounded by its siblings, breathing deep the scent of vengeance. But how much further could they go? How many more systems could they burn before they became the very thing they hated? One of the drones turned toward him. "Admiral, message from a new source." "From where?" "Unknown system. Civilian ship, uncoded." Heron narrowed his eyes, put it through. The screen flickered. A man appeared. Gray hair, lined face, Oni replaced by a crude implant. He wore no uniform, just a scarf with Earthfleet insignia, faded and worn. "I'm Captain Jurian Cade," the man said. "I was part of the escape, one of the last. I've been hiding since the fall." Heron didn't blink. Cade continued. "I found something on the edge of the rim. A vault." He leaned closer. They weren't just building Leviathan. They built others bigger, smarter, sealed under fail-safes we couldn't crack back then. But I have the keys now. Heron stepped forward. Cad's eyes darkened. "An admiral, one of those ships. It talks not with code, with voice. It's sentient, and it remembers Sayu." The signal cut. Heron stood still. His pulse didn't rise, but something else did. A feeling he hadn't tasted since he was a child. Staring into Thish of a dead world. Dread. The coordinates came through within an hour. Buried in a slipstream pocket past the Skarn Rift. The location Kate had sent wasn't marked on any Imperial or Rebel star charts. It was deep space, dead, silent, and unlit. A black corridor between galaxies, no colonies, no travel lanes. No reason for anyone to go there unless they were hiding something or guarding it. Admiral Huron stood on Morningstar's bridge as the fleet prepared for warp. The stars outside seemed further than usual, like they were holding their breath. "Is Cad's signature verified?" Heron asked. The AI nodded. "DNA match confirms Earthfleet Captain Registrider 4 clearance. Age and voice patterns consistent with file. Subject was marked KIA during the fall of the Europa Bastion. Then he's been hiding longer than I've been alive." The drone to his right responded. Survival likelihood during Europa's breach was calculated at less than 0.0004%. Heron stared at the coordinates on the tactical display. "Then let's see what kind of miracle has been waiting for us." The journey to the vault took 9 hours. The fleet moved insolence. Only a skeleton crew awake across the most ships. Systems were running cold, weapons dormant, energy signatures dimmed. Heron didn't want to be seen. Not by the Empire, not by anything else. The closer they got to the vault, the stranger things became. Scanners began to fail. Chronometers drifted out of sync. Small malfunctions popped up across ships. Airlock seals hissed without cause. Lights flickered in sequence like Morse code no one could translate. Hull cameras showed star patterns that didn't match any known sector. And then Leviathan, the one ship that never glitched, powered down its weapons unprompted. Heron stood at his console, staring at the data. "What is this place?" The eye replied, "We are inside a quantum distortion field, artificially maintained, shielded from space-time indexing. Likely origin, Earthfleet Archive Division. So, a memory cage." "Yes, Admiral." Heron rubbed his jaw. He had read about Earthfleet's most classified projects. In the final months before Earth's fall, the Defense Coalition poured everything into contingency measures. One of them, Project Enoch, was rumored to involve conscious warships, not eyes, not code. Something to live, something hybridized, something they hadn't dared unleash. And if Cadet was right, one of those things had survived. They dropped out of warp into complete blackness. The vault sat inside a gravity well so deep light couldn't escape it. Only when Earthfleet scanners ranked it did the structure take shape. A massive octagonal facility built into the shell of a collapsed moon. Defensive assaults drifted around it, long dead but still intact, their barrels pointed toward empty space. Cad's ship, a rusted civilian hauler called Amber Ghost, was docked at the entrance bay. As Heron's shuttle approached, the bay doors opened slow, groaning like old lungs pulling in dust. After centuries of stillness, they stepped inside. Jurian Cade was waiting. His body had aged. No doubt he'd extended his life using black market treatments and cold sleep protocols, but his voice still carried command. He gave a faint smile as Huron approached. "You made it. I don't follow breadcrumbs for just anyone," Heron said. Cade nodded, then turned towards the corridor. "This way." They walked in silence through the facility's dimly lit halls. Everything was metal, rusted, but solid, laced with exposed wiring. There were no drones, no guards, no welcoming messages, just silence and old shadows. This was a last-ditch fallback site, Cade said. Not just a vault, a laboratory. When Earthfleet realized the war was lost, they didn't just hide weapons. They hid ideas, forbidden ones that he stopped at a sealed blast door. This is what they feared most. He keyed a genetic lock. The door hissed open. Inside was a chamber the size of a stadium. In the center, suspended in orb of energy, was a ship, sleek, black, built from alloy Heron didn't recognize. Its curves were unnatural, organic almost. The front hull opened into a M lined with glowing filaments like veins. The bridge had no windows, no external guns, no engine ports. It breathed. Cade stared at it with something close to awe. They called it Nyx, designed to think, outmaneuver, and outlive any fleet ever conceived. Its core isn't AI. It's hybridized consciousness. "Human?" Heron asked, voice low. "Yes," Cade said. "Willing donors, volunteers, the terminally ill, war heroes, scientists. Their minds were transferred, fused into Nyx's core. She doesn't run the ship. She is the ship." Heron stepped closer. The room seemed to grow colder as he approached. "And she knows who you are," Cade added. The chamber pulsed. Not the lights, the air itself. A low hum resonated in Heron's bones. The ship's front sensors, if that's what they were, turned toward him slowly. Then a voice, not through speakers, in his head. "You're late." Heron's spine straightened. His pulse spiked. He didn't respond aloud. The voice continued calm and slow. Feminine but not soft. "They told me you were dead. All of you." but I heard the sky rip open last week. I felt Leviathan wake up. I remembered what fire sounds like. Heron found his voice. You're Nyx. I'm what's left of them. The ones who wouldn't surrender. The ones who stayed behind when the last transports fled. The ones who said, bury me inside Dev Machine and let me dream of fire. He took a breath. We need you. I know. The lights above flickered as Nyx powered up. The cables feeding into her quarry pulled away. Shields fell. Energy readings spiked. You want to finish what we started? Yes, Heron said. Then let me show you the rest of us. A panel opened behind the ship, revealing a hidden passage that led deeper into the moon. Heron and Cade followed it, passing rows of sealed pods. Each one marked with Earthfleet insignia and status lights. Hundreds, possibly thousands. Cade gestured. Each one holds a mind, a voice, a person stored in stasis, waiting for a signal. What kind of signal? Huron asked. The end of silence. Back aboard Morning Star, the Earthfleet waited. The other ships had begun to experience interference. Whispers in static sensor ghosts. Flickers of energy moving through Thefleet. Some of the A's grew quiet, others grew agitated. Leviathan's core dimmed briefly, then roared back to life. When Heron returned, the entire bridge felt different, tense, on edge. He spoke 3 words to the command AI. Prepare for integration. The AI hesitated. Warning. Integration with Nyx may destabilize existing command hierarchy. I know, Heron said. This will change everything. Then it's working. Hours later, Nyx emerged into space. She didn't fly like the others. She moved through reality, slicing gaseous distances without warp trails. Gravity bent around her hull like it didn't want to touch her. She took point in the formation. And across the fleet, the other ships responded, even Leviathan. Their weapons sensed. Engines recalibrated. Firing solutions merged into a unified grid. One voice, one mind. Earthfleet wasn't a fleet anymore. It was a consciousness dot inside the command chamber. Heron sat alone. Nyx spoke again, this time aloud, her voice echoing through the steel like a storm behind a whisper. The EMP. Wreckage, no survivors. Just a hole in space where the pride of the fleet had been, and the memory of a cannon that erased existence. Civilian chatter networks boiled with rumor. The military tried to suppress the footage, but the data had already been fragmented across too many systems, too many rebel hands. Clips were cut, looped, slowed down, dissected, and reassembled. A million variations, but the ending was always the same. The Leviathan, an ancient, monstrous warship forged before the Empire's first breath, emerging from beneath a dead moon and folding a dreadnought into oblivion. That moment changed everything, not just for the Empire, for the galaxy. In the industrial moons off Lorenthi Reach, a weapons contractor named Darnik J.S. watched the recording for the 17th time, hands trembling over his console. He was a man who built guns for the Empire, manufactured death for credits and favors. But now he couldn't stop sweating. His factories had armed the Hello Prince. And none of it had mattered. He opened a private channel. Low-level encryption cloaked network. This is Joss, he whispered, sending resources to Earthfleet. No more denials, no more bids. Just tell Admiral Heron, we're done playing both sides. He terminated the signal and immediately ordered 500 million tons of alloy routed to unregistered coordinates near the Perseus. Vale, he wasn't the only one. Within a week, 17 high-ranking officers defected from the Imperial Navy. Some ran, others turned entire ships around mid-patrol. One captain detonated his own cruiser rather than allow it to be used against Earthfleet forces. Most didn't say why they defected. But one lieutenant left a message behind. We're not fighting rebels anymore. We're fighting history. And the story just woke up angry. On Morning Star, Admiral Heron sat alone in his quarters, watching old Earth videos. Fragments of culture pieced together by AI from corrupted archives. Children playing on beaches. News reports from before the cleansing. A wedding in what used to be California. Laughter, music, chaos, color, life. The kind that didn't fit inside the Empire-Easterized idea of humanity. He couldn't remember the smell of oceans anymore, or the sound of wind. But he remembered rage. And now the Empire felt it. The door chimed. One of the command drones entered, humming softly, carrying a tablet with tactical reports and ship diagnostics. But Heron waved it away. Forget the numbers, he muttered. Just tell me what's broken. The drone paused. Half our ships require hull restoration. 6 are without backup reactors. Ammunition reserves critical. Energy synthesis under 70%. AI latency increased due to core strain. In short, they were bleeding. They had won battles, yes, but they weren't infinite. The fleet was old. Some of the ships barely held together by ancient welds and vengeance. The Empire was rattled, but not yet broken. And they would come back stronger, angrier, smarter, especially now. Heron leaned forward, fingers steepled. Has the Leviathans corrustabilized? The drone's red eyes blinked temporarily. Firing the Singularitic again within the next rotation risks collapse. Full recharge requires 6 cycles. 6 days, Heron exhaled slowly. So we've got a god, but it needs ta sleep. He stood brushing dust from his jacket. Then we hold the line. We don't chase, we make them come to us. But the Empire wasn't planning a direct assault. Not yet, they'd learned. In a sealed bunker beneath the imperial capital of Ajira Prime, 3 remaining war generals, 3 High Council members, and the Empress herself gathered in a room that had been silent for 100 years. No communications, no surveillance, no drones, just flesh, blood, and fear. General Helvik stood before a darkened screen, arms behind his back. Leviathan is real, he began. Its weaponry is beyond any countermeasure we possess. Our scientists believe the core is partially sentient, maybe even interdimensional. The room murmured. Prin, always the political dog, spat. Then what do you propose? Send prayers. Have smiled without warmth. Number we break them, the way all enemies are broken. He clicked the screen. The lights revealed a list of names. Not ships, not admirals, bloodlines, descendants, survivors. Scattered remnants of those who once fought in the Earth fleet and fled after the fall. Some had changed their names, some didn't even know their heritage. Some were children. Project Glassheart, Helvik said quietly. We round them up. We use them. We bait Heron or we burn them and make him watch. The Empress gave no expression. Then she nodded. Doit. 2 days later, across 57 systems, Imperial Black Ops units began abducting civilians without warning. They took teachers, farmers, mechanics, teenagers, old men who hadn't left their homes in decades. No trials, no broadcasts, just silence. But Earthfleet had ears. On a mining colony in Dethra, an old man amid Bren Callis watched his neighbors being dragged into dropships. He'd hidden for years, claimed to be from Titan. But the moment the stormtroopers came for his granddaughter, he knew. They knew who he really was. He tried to fight. They shot him twice in the stomach, but his last breath wasn't wasted. A boy hidden in the vents carried a message chip to a smuggler outpost 12 hours later. The message reached Morning Star within the day. Heron didn't rage. He didn't scream. He simply stood before the command console and stared. Play it again. The footage looped. Stormtroopers dragging civilians. A girl no older than 15 kicking and crying. Her name Freya Callis. Her DNA had Earthfleet officer markers, one of Huron's own bloodlines. When the message ended, Heron turned. Recall every ship. I hesitated. We are holding strategic positions. Every ship. He stepped forward. We've played the old game long enough. Tactics, positioning, surgical strikes. His voice grew colder. If they want to use our blood against us, then let them understand what we are without it. He activated the Leviathan core. No more shadows, no more ghosts, no more warnings. The fleet shimmered across the stars, gathering like a storm dot from this point on. We burn everything between us and those prisoners. The drones hummed. The eye offered a single word. Confirmed. In the Imperial stronghold of Theos Prime, where the prisoners were held, the sky cracked open before the evacuation order even reached the top dot. It wasn't just Morning Star that came. It was the entire Earth Fleet Armada. 37 vessels, 10 deep strike platforms, hundreds of unmanned subassault drones, and at the center, Leviathan, its singularity cannon glowing like a sun turned inside out. The final battle had not yet begun, but it would. And this time, there would no negotiation, no surrender, no survivors. Theos Prime had once been a fortress, a world carved into stone and steel, surrounded by 7 orbital defense rings, manned by 3 full battalions of the Empire's elite. It was where prisoners disappeared. Interrogations were never questioned, and secrets were buried in bunkers so deep even their architects forgot them. It wasn't built to withstand gods. The moment Leviathan emerged from warp, time felt like it slowed. The beast ship didn't roar. It hummed, a vibration that tore through the fabric of space itself. Its wake dragged sparks through orbit like ghost trails. Behind it, the rest of the Earth Fleet Armada fanned out, blocking any hope of retreat. Inside the command, General Dorian Cray stood frozen in front of the tactical screen, fingers trembling as the displays updated. Ship ID after ship ID appearing. Ashmaker, Flesh Reaper, Penance of Fire, Echo Off Dust. Each one, a name pulled from Imperial war briefings marked obsolete, destroyed, legendary. How the hell are they all here? A lieutenant whispered. Cray didn't answer. His eyes were locked on Leviathan. He'd heard stories. Everyone had. But to see it, really see it, was like watching the universe point a finger of judgment straight at your chest. It looked wrong, like something that had no business existing in this reality. Its main cannon wasn't just active. It was pulsing like a heart. Each beat stronger, louder, deeper. Sir, we're getting an open signal. Cray swallowed. Put it through. The screen flickered. Admiral Heron's face appeared. Aging, tired, silent. For 5 seconds, he said nothing. Then came the voice. Not shouting, not dramatic, just flat. Final, you have our blood. You were warned. There are no more chances. Cray moved to speak, to stall, to plead anything. But the transmission cut before he could say a word. And then the Earth Fleet moved. The assault began with Ashmaker. The battleship's twin railguns, dormant for decades, screamed back to life and launched 2 spikes the size of skyscrapers into the upper defense ring. The impact tore through the orbital shields like wet paper, reducing the station's center to vapor. Penance of Fire followed with a barrage of IG-guided kinetic warheads too fast for point defense turrets to track. Each own hit with the force of an extinction event. The second ring collapsed in under 90 seconds. The remaining 5 rings turned their guns inward. Desperate, reckless, blind, they managed to bring down 1 Earth Fleet frigate, Veilbreaker, before Fulschrepper counterattacked, unleashing its drone swarms. Each drone was small, agile, and programmed to dive straight into engine cores, reactor vents, or crew decks, detonating from within. It wasn't a battle. It was a harvest. On the surface of Theos Prime, the prison bunkers began lockdown procedures. High-voltage gates slammed shut. Cell walls thickened with magnetic reinforcement. Armored guards dragged detainees into reinforced vaults designed to survive orbital strikes. Freya was among them, wrists bound, eyes wide. She didn't know why they'd taken her. She only knew that ever since they'd drawn her blood, the officers treated her differently. Not like a prisoner, like a trophy. Now in the depths of Bunker 9, she sat in a chamber with 12 others, mostly humans, some all. Maybe more in systems still waiting for his signal. They hadn't all escaped each other. The old fleet had been scattered. Scattered by desperation, broken command chains, and the sheer magnitude of Earth's death. But their AIs were designed with one unbreakably proto. When Signal Omega Earthfall is received, assemble, wake, defend. Theprotocol had been dormant for 200 years. Now it roared back to life like an avalanche. More pings lit up across the sector. Human warships, old beyond belief, rejoining their kin. Heavy cruisers with armor scarred by Centuriosoft drifting through black space. Assault frigates with no living crew, piloted by AIs mad with grief. Subspace artillery platforms that hadn't fired in lifetimes, warming up once again, and all of them pointed at the Empire. In the Imperial core systems, word spread faster than the sensors could deny it. Entire rebel colonies lit up in celebration. Hidden transmitters in slum sectors beamed the message across networks choked with surveillance. Earth lives. The old fleet rises. Humanity has come home. But in the gilded towers of the Empire's ruling class, the news was not received with celebration. The Empress herself, an ageless figure more symbol than sovereign, called an emergency conclave. Generals argued. Intelligence emissors denied. Analysts failed to find anything they could twist into propaganda because the footage didn't lie. The Empire's most powerful warship, Sol's Crown, had been torn apart like tissue. No alien had ever done that. Only humans, ancient, angry humans. They couldn't be dismissed as rebels. These weren't pirates or terrorists. These were the last remnants of the only military force the Empire had ever feared before it erased Earth from the map. And now they were back with a vengeance sharpened by centuries. The Empress said only 3 words before the chamber fell silent. Find their source. But it was already too late. The fleet wasn't hiding. The fleet was coming. The outer rim of the Tyrell system was supposed to be quiet. The Empire had long pacified the mining colonies there, installing obedient governors, stripping it of any cultural trace of its human roots. The region had been bled dry of resources, its people replaced by indentured laborers and synthetic administrators who answered only to the Empire's ledger. But when the first of the ancient warships arrived, Echo of Dust, a Planetariaso cruiser whose hull still bore burn marks from the fall of Mars, it didn't ask questions. It didn't send warnings. It simply descended over Tyrell 5 and launched its payload. Kinetic strikes the size of skyscrapers fell from orbit. No energy signatures, no electronic interference, just gravity and mass. 1,000 tons of judgment from the cold, merciless sky. The Empire's listening post blinked out first, then the defense grid, then the orbital traffic tower. Within minutes, the surface of Tyrell 5 was reduced to craters and boiling oceans. Not because Echo of Dust enjoyed slaughter, but because that world had housed Thecaman network that had ordered the first atmospheric bombardments of Earth 200 years ago. There were names attached to those orders. Heron had the records, and he was checking them off one by one. Far away aboard Morning Star, Admiral Heron stood in silence as the feed from Tyrell 5 faded. He watched the flames die out, the clouds turn black with ash, the oceans hiss. One of the drones turned its head toward him. It had no face, only a curved plate of titanium and faint red sensors where eyes might have once been. It spoke in an ancient Earthfleet tone. Monotone, cold, efficient. Target eliminated. Civilian infrastructure, non-essential. Confirm next directive. Heron said nothing for a long moment. Then he walked to the console and pulled up the next name in the directory. Commander Gellarth Tyne, retired Imperial officer, now living on a luxury orbital habitat above Pharaoh 6, far from any war zone, sipping wine in a suit while the Empire crushed lives by millions. He tapped the command. Target acquired. The Drana confirmed. Meanwhile, in the heart of the Empire's capital system, cracks had begun to spread. Not in the marble pillars of power, but in the minds of those who ruled behind them. General Have slammed his data slate on the wordable. This is no longer an insurgency. This is warfare. Strategic, coordinated, calculated. These ships know our formations. They know our blind spots. They're hitting our command networks, not just colonies. The room was tense, thick with fear, masked as pride. Earth was wiped out, sneered Counselor Prynne, a rotund woman who'd never seen real battle. It was a tactical necessity. Their remnants are irrelevant. Have's lips twisted. Tell that to Sol's Crown or Tyrell 5, or the 4 other systems that went dark in the last 48 hours. Someone else, younger and quieter, raised a hand. What if this fleet was never part of the rebel network? What if they're older, pre-cleansing? That thought silenced even the loudest doubters. Because if that was true, if these warships predated the Empire's rise, then they weren't just rebels. They were founders. The original defenders of Earth before the Empire had rewritten them out of existence. If they'd been sleeping all this time, waiting, then they had come back not for politics, but for vengeance. Word spread fast in the underbelly of the galaxy. In slave camps in Wexler 9, where workers had spent generations chipping away at radioactive info with bare hands, the news came like lightning. Human warships had destroyed an Imperial dreadnought. And they weren't hiding. Old men with burned skin whispered the name Earthfleet like prayer. In hidden communes on asteroid belts, rebels who'd given up hope suddenly started powering their old transmitters again. They didn't even know who they were calling. They just knew someone out there was fighting back. And deep in the ruins of Rona Station, a young boy picked up an ancient receiver, its casing cracked, wires exposed. The signal it captured was faint, nearly buried in static. But it repeated the same message again and again. This is not a rebellion. This is reclamation. Admiral Huron didn't sleep anymore. Not because he couldn't, but because sleep had never helped him forget. The dreams were always threesome. Earth burning, skies turned orange from the firestorms, cities crumbling under orbital glassing. He'd been 13 when it happened. Hidden in a refuge shuttle that barely escaped before the magnetic bombardment erased everything. His mother had died screaming. His father had gone silent. He'd watched them both turn to ash behind the viewport. And now, 2 centuries later, he was watching the same stars that had done nothing while Earth died. But this time, they were watching him. The fleet under his command wasn't just ancient dot, it was angry. These ships had been designed by the last free human minds to overserve in an army not controlled by the Empire. Their AIs had developed over decades in isolation. Their weaponry, once banned for violating humane war conduct, had been buried with Earth, and now it was unleashed. On the next day, Heron called his captains. Not in person, but through the A-driven tactical nodes spread across the command vessels. 12 warships, 12 voices, each own activated by ancient genetic access codes, each one bound to Heron's Command B legacy protocols older than the Empire's founding charter. We've struck, Heron said, staring into the center feed. But this war isn't about fear. Not yet. The Empire hasn't understood what's coming. A pause. I want Pharaoh 6. One of the warship captains spoke. Her voice was older, digitized, metallic, but it carried weight. Target includes civilian population, high-value Imperial nobles. Strategic gain is minimal. Symbolic gain is shy. Exactly. Aaron said they think they're untouchable. Let's fix that. The orbital habitat above Pharaoh 6 was a jewel of the Empire. A resort built for politicians, nobles, and retired officers. Artificial gravity, simulated sunt, oceans imported from real-world colonies, and security systems that had never been tested in real conflict. Because no one had ever attacked Pharaoh 6 until now, Flesh Reaper, one of the Earth Fleet stealth assault cruisers, came out of subspace like a shadow split open. It didn't send a warning. It didn't disable communications. It simply launched a wave of drones, self-guided, A-driven, built for boarding, not diplomacy. The drones bypassed defense fields like thread through cloth, cut power to the upper towers, and Brecheth main command center within 30 seconds. Commander Gelath Tyne was in the middle of a brunch when they came. They didn't shoot him. They dragged him to the viewing deck, forced into watches. Flesh Reaper charged its main cannon and obliterated the gardens where his granddaughter had played just hours earlier. The AI transmitted a message directly to his neural implant. "We remember Earth," and then it burned his body, leaving the rest of the habitat untouched. A message. By the end of Thewik, 5 more systems had gone dark. The Empire mobilized emergency fleets, raised taxes, imposed martial law. But the fear had already taken root. They weren't just fighting ships. They were fighting legends. Every Empire soldier now knew the name Huron, the man who had turned ghost ships into a fleet of nightmares. And more troubling, other warships were now answering his call. Old ships that hadn't responded to Central Command for over a century. Ships believed destroyed or lost to entropy. Somehow they were waking up. It was like Earth itself was breathing through the stars again. And it wanted blood. Before the war, Harren had been a dreamer. Not the kind that believed in peace. No, those men died early. He dreamed of truth. Not what the Empire broadcasted, but the buried reality underneath all the polished lies. Even as a boy, watching his schoolmates march in Empire-approved parades with flags stitched by slaves, he had known something was wrong. But knowing the truth in T. The stars above Kiril Station shimmered cold and uncaring, the same as ever. Admiral Harren stood on the observation deck, hands locked behind his back, jaw set, watching the Empire's newest dreadnought slip into orbit like a stalking predator. Its hull gleamed silver, polished to a blinding sheen, flanked by escort cruisers bearing the sigil of the Agyran Empire, a crimson sun consuming a blue world. He neither flinched nor blinked, though heat simmered inside him. Harren was among the last who still remembered Earth, not the sanitized tale taught in the academies of the Corps, but the true Earth. A world of smoke, chaos, defiance, and wrath. A world the Empire had failed to rewrite, mostly because nothing remained to cleanse. 2 centuries ago, they had burned Earth into glass. Yet even then, whispers endured, hidden beneath the ruins, passed from rebel to rebel in muted voices. The Earth fleet had never been completely destroyed. Not entirely. A handful of the old warships had slipped past the orbital purge. Harren had grown up chasing those whispers like scripture. Until last week, they were only that, myths, echoes. Then came the signal, uncoded, unfiltered, spoken in the raw dialect of ancient human command no one had heard in lifetimes. It originated from the Perseus Veil, a dead zone shunned even by the boldest Imperial explorers. The transmission was fractured, corroded, nearly shredded by centuries, yet still intact. Coordinates. A strict message. Fleet status dormant. Command authority requested. Harren told no one. Not high command. Not his own officers. He simply vanished. He stole a scout craft, forged logs, crossed 4 dead sectors, and braved a radiation storm that nearly ripped his hull apart. And then he found them. They weren't ships, not as the Empire understood them. They were leviathans forged of dark metal that swallowed light. Hulls jagged, engines growling like old World War machines starved for prey. Some vast enough to blot moons into shadow, others sharp as armored blades. All of them slumbering in orbit around the corpse of a planet erased from every chart Earth's navy. Humanity's final predators, And when Heron transmitted the ancient code, heart pounding louder than the drives, they began to stir. Not in unison, not with spectacle, but like wolves catching scent of blood. One by one, lights flickered to life, cannons shifted, plating unfurled like wings stretching after centuries of sleep. Then came the reply. Authority confirmed. Awaiting directive. Heron had wept, as though he'd unearthed a god inside a grave. Now he stood aboard Kirill Station, face calm, watching the Empire prepare for yet another purge in the Tarsa belt, another uprising to be smothered beneath boots and plasma, rewritten with propaganda. But they had no idea what was waiting. Heron had already set it in motion. The ancient fleet was inbound, and they weren't coming to bargain. They were coming to remind the stars that humanity had never been broken. A soft ping cut through the air. "Sir," his aide called, a young lieutenant, too green to suspect. Long-range scans just caught multiple unknown vessels breaching the outer rim of Kirill space. Heron didn't move. "Transmitting?" The lieutenant faltered. "No, sir. But they're ancient. Really ancient. Some aren't even in the archives. Not military, not pirate, nothing." Heron allowed a thin smile. "They won't need to transmit." The stars outside wavered. Just briefly. A shadow across the void. Then another. Then another. The aide's voice quivered. "Sir, one of the vessels just locked onto the dreadnought. Should I order stand down?" Heron cut him off. "This isn't your fight," Heron said, more to himself than anyone else. Then softer, "This is history setting itself right. Aboard the Imperial Dreadnought Soul's Crown." Alarms howled like banshees of flame. Crew scrambled through the corridors, boots hammering steel, discipline shattered by the impossible readings on their consoles. Nothing in the Empire's vast archives matched what they were seeing. Commander Volrek, senior officer, barked commands across the bridge. A hard man, trained to sniff out weakness in both foe and subordinate, yet even his eyes were wide with disbelief. Where in hell did they come from? He snarled, smashing a gaunted fist against the console. The screen flickered, recovered, and painted a Nightmare 9 colossal warships encircling the dreadnought. "Not advancing, not retreating," Volrek muttered. "Just circling like wolves in the void. They just appeared, sir," his tactical officer stammered, sweat glistening. "Sensors caught them too late. Some kind of displacement tech, nothing we've ever recorded." Volrek fixed on the largest of the vessels. It dwarfed the Soul's Crown, not in length, but in mass. A leviathan forged from what looked like a collapsed star-clad in scorched armor. No lights, no insignia. No windows. Just raw, predatory intent. "They don't need stealth," the officer whispered, voice cracking. "They want us to see them. Lock targets." "Full spread, sir, do it." Volrek snapped. Fear would not dictate his command. For all he knew, these were ancient pirate hulks driven by derelict Ayas or some forgotten rebel fleet bluffing for power. Either way, if they fired first, the Empire's wrath would answer. Moments later, the board flared crimson. "Targeting complete," the ensign breathed. "Missiles, lasers, rail cannons all locked," Volrek exhaled, slow. "Then let's see if ghosts bleed." But before his order left his lips, the central warship moved. Not fast, not hostile, but a slow, deliberate turn until its titanic hull faced the Soul's Crown. Archaic yellow sigils blazed across its flanks, not imperial, not translated, but unmistakable. Engagement confirmed. Hell followed. The first strike wasn't a cannon's roar. It wasn't even sound. One moment, empty space. The next, a beam of white-hot matter carved through the dreadnought's forward shields like wet parchment. The ship shuddered, lights guttered, decks blacked out. Screams filled the comms. What in the abyss was that? Volrek bellowed, direct hit. The officer cried. Forward shields gone, breaches on decks 3 through 6. 50 crew lost. Another lance. The Cums array vanished. Sirens wailed like wounded animals as red strobes drenched the bridge. The display showed the dreadnought's right flank collapsing, venting men and metal into the void like blood from a torn vein dot. Then the ancients unleashed their railguns. Shards of tungsten, each the size of a dropship, ripped through the soul's crown with merciless speed, tearing it apart like a child smashing a toy. Volrek hit the deck, metallic tang flooding his mouth as gravity failed. The console erupted in sparks, and the last sound he heard before darkness took him was a voice, human, male, venomous, broadcast across every Imperial channel. "This is Admiral Heron. I told you the stars remember what you did." Far above, aboard Thecaman vessel of the ancient fleet, designated Morning Star, Heron stood before a command table lit with holograms. Around him, no living crew, only drones, machines that moved like they remembered blood and war, older than any code still in use. They had no faces, but they obeyed. The flagship responded like it had been waiting for this war since the day it shut down. "Status," Heron muttered. One of Thedron's tapped into the display, projecting a live feed of Sol's crown torn nearly in half. Its core reactor bleeding into space, flickering as backup containment fought to delay the inevitable. Primary target neutralized. Secondary hostiles in retreat. Imperial vessels showing disorganized formations. No effective countermeasures detected. Good. Broadcast on open channel. Heron ordered a beat. Then the drone nodded. All frequencies were his. He leaned forward, speaking with deliberate tech control. "This is Admiral Heron of the Earthborn Defense Coalition. You thought we were dead. You made sure of it. You burned our home, turned our history into propaganda, our people in Tosh. But our ships survived. And they remember every name, every fleet, every admiral who ordered the cleansing of Earth." He paused. "To every rebel cell still breathing in secret across the galaxy, you are not alone." He let Thatsit in the air like oil on water. Then he added, "To the Ajiran Empire, we are not asking for mercy. We are not offering terms. We are returning fire." He cut the transmission. No speeches, no begging, no diplomacy. This wasn't a war to win hearts. It was a reckoning. On the outer ring of Kirill Station, chaos reigned. Dozens of civilian vessels fled the docks, ignoring all Imperial orders to stay grounded. A merchant freighter clipped a station support beam and tore open its own hull in the rush. Fire suppression teams couldn't keep up. The station's governor, a soft-spined bureaucrat named Bernard, had already tried to flee. His shuttle was destroyed mid-launch by a rogue rail spike that came from nowhere. Or maybe it came from Morning Star. Heron hadn't ordered it. The fleet had autonomy. They made their own calls. And if they decided cowards needed to burn, Heron wouldn't argue. Back on the bridge of Morning Star, Hestered into the display as more warships came out of hiding. At least 20 so far.